So good morning everybody, welcome for our lesson today. We are going to talk about types of migration. Then we are going to look at different types of migration. We are also going to look at the reasons why people migrate from one place to another and so on. So we have what you call, we shall first define what is migration. Migration is movement of people from one place to another. So this is what you call migration. Migration is the movement of people from one place to another. So we shall discuss types of migration. So we have what you call rural migration. Rural are those areas where people live in the rural areas. We are talking about a home or in the villages. That's what you call rural areas. So when you talk about rural migration, then we are looking at people migrating from one rural area or one village to another. That's what we call rural migration. Then we have rural urban migration. Rural urban migration is the movement of people from one rural area to urban areas. When you talk about urban areas, then we are talking about towns. So people migrate from villages to towns. Then we have urban migration. This is the movement of people from one town to another. For example, talk about Nairobi to Mombasa. Then we have urban rural migration. Urban rural migration. So from urban areas to rural areas. So that is what you're talking about, from town to rural areas. So we shall start with what you call rural urban migration. Rural urban migration. Then so it's the movement of people from rural areas to urban areas. Movement of people from rural areas to urban areas. So people are moving from rural areas or villages to towns. That's what you're talking about. So we shall look at the reasons for rural urban migration. Rural urban migration. So number one, search. So we have search for employment. So we have search for employment. Employment are job opportunities. Most people move to urban areas to look for employment or job opportunities because we know very well many industries are found in urban areas. So when people move from villages to Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, Thika, Garissa, they are going to look for employment. This is the main reason. So this is the main reason for rural urban migration. So remember that. Then number two, recreational. We have what we call recreational facilities. Recreational facilities. And when you talk about recreational facilities, then we are looking at entertainment facilities. Like you have a stadium where you can go and watch the ball. For example, talk about Kakamega Homeboys playing and Gor Mahia, the KPL. So that it is. Example of stadium in Kenya, we have Nyayo Stadium in Nairobi. Then we have also another one called Kasarani. Kasarani. You'll find those are some of the stadium. Then example of also recreation facility, we have what we call disco halls. Disco halls talk about the carnival. Carnival is a very big area where people go for recreational facilities. Like maybe you have music concert, people from different parts of the world are coming in Kenya. We have maybe Churchill show. We can hold this in this what we call disco halls. Then another recreational facility can be cinema halls. Halls. So these are recreational facilities we are talking about. So people also migrate in urban areas to get good opportunities like this one, especially the young people, because they are found in urban areas where people can enjoy themselves. So that it is. Then number 3, joining learning institutions. And when we talk about learning institutions, then we are talking about colleges, universities, then we have schools, we have also what we call polytechnics. So these are learning institutions where people also migrate in towns to go and enjoy those facilities. Then the reason also why people migrate in towns, we have trading activities, trade. Yeah, when you talk about trading activities, then we are looking at any business. So you can establish any business. Can be M-Pesa services, M-Pesa, can be banking, hotel and management, any business. Because you know very well in a town, we have very many, a lot of market to any business. We can establish selling of tomato, M-Pesa services, banking, insurance, talk about a hotel. So people migrate to town to do those activities. And then number 5, we have good infrastructures. And when you talk about good infrastructure, then we are talking about the roads. Then we have also we have water, piped water. Then we have electricity. Good schools. So those are what we call the infrastructure. So especially young people, they migrate to town because of good infrastructure in towns. For example, when you go to social media, you'll find that young people, they like where you have good facilities like good roads. We have piped water. We have electricity, because young people, they like to watch, maybe they are watching movie. They need electricity to operate those gadgets. They like smartphones, maybe internet accessing and so on. They need electricity. So these are what we call the infrastructure. So this one also attracts people in towns to go and stay in those areas. Then another one, number 6, ethnic clashes. And the ethnic is the same as community. So you have had very many communities fighting, like you talk about the Samburu fighting with the Maasai, stealing cattle from one another and so on. So this one may also lead to some people to migrate to towns and settle there, because everybody likes where there is peace, where they can settle well without any problem. So that's what you're talking about. And then we have also inadequate land in rural areas. Inadequate land in rural areas. So this may make people also to migrate to town to settle there and so on. But remember, the main one is search for employment. That's what they have said. So these are some of the reasons for migration or for rural-urban migration. Next, we are going to look at urban-rural migration. Urban-rural migration. So number 2, we have urban rural migration. So urban rural migration is movement of people from towns to rural areas. So urban rural migration is the movement of people from towns or urban areas to rural areas. People are now moving from town to villages. So that's what we call urban rural migration. Reasons. We're going to look at the reasons why people migrate from urban areas to rural areas. So number 1 is retirement. Retirement from jobs. So when you work for the government or any institution and you become old, or the time comes for retire, then you need to retire and then you leave for the young people opportunity also to continue with the work. So after retirement, now people migrate and move to rural areas to settle there with their family and so on. Because you cannot stay in town paying rent or maybe buying food when there is an opportunity at home and you don't have job opportunity in urban areas. So that's what they're talking about. So this is the main reason for rural urban migration or urban rural migration. So this is the main reason. People migrate mainly because of retirement from jobs and so on. Then number 2, we have a lack of employment. We have said many people migrate in towns to look for employment opportunities, but when there is no employment opportunity, then you cannot sit in town. You need to move to go back to the rural areas where you can stay well and so on. So that it is when there is no opportunities or job opportunities, then people will start migrating to towns, to rural areas. Then we have also number 3, difficulty in settling in towns. So sometimes people find it difficult to settle in towns because of high expenses. The life of town is very expensive and maybe you don't have employment. So some people also take this one, make them to move and migrate to rural areas where they can settle without any problem. So difficulty in settling in towns also make people to move and go to rural areas. Then we have number 4, overpopulation in towns, overpopulation in towns. This also may make people to decide to move and go and settle in rural areas. That's what you're talking about. Then number 5, search for agricultural land. Search for agricultural land for farming. So people will move from towns to go in rural areas to search for agricultural land for farming because we don't have lands to buy in the urban areas. So when somebody has worked and then have got some money, you will move to rural areas to go and buy some land somewhere, and then you can settle down with his or her family. And then we have also number 6, we have what we call loss of jobs. Yeah, Like you remember what has happened with the coronavirus, outbreak of coronavirus, where most of the companies closed up. So people had to move and go back to settle in rural areas because the jobs have been lost because of the outbreak of COVID-19. I think you understand what I'm talking about. So loss of jobs make people also to move from towns to go and settle in rural areas. Then we have also number 7, resignation of jobs. Resignation of jobs. So resignation is to leave what you are doing, any work you are doing. Some people resign. They leave the work they are doing, then they decide to come settle at home. So it is that's now what you call resignation of jobs. When you resign, you have left the job you have been doing, then you need to go and settle in rural areas. So that it is. Then we have what we call number 8, what we call the government policy. So government policy is just a plan. For example, we talked about the government policy of moving industries from rural areas to urban, or urban areas to rural areas. This is called decentralization. So we can stroke this with the decentralization. What is decentralization? Decentralization is moving of industries from urban areas to rural areas. The main reason why the government may engage in this is to create job opportunities for the young people in rural areas. Because you have said most of the companies and industries that are found in rural urban areas. So when the government can come up with a policy to establish industries in rural areas, that is what you call decentralization. And that's the best way we can control population in towns. So we can move or build industries in rural areas to provide employment. So that is under what we call the government policy. So the government policy also can make some people to migrate, because there is no way I can stay in town when there is an industry near my home. I'll go there and then I start working in that industry to provide employment and also for other people and so on. Then another one, we are going to look at rural migration. So that's all about urban-rural migration. So we have rural migration. This is the movement. This is the movement of people from one rural area to another rural area. Yeah. So here people are moving from one rural area to another. That's what we call rural migration. People are moving from one village to another. So that's what we call rural migration. Then reasons. We are going to look to draw back some reasons. So number 1, we have what we call European settlement. European settlements. So I think we talked about the European settlers. Then we said settlers, they were European farmers. When the European came in Kenya, they chased or they took African lands, those were highlands. Then some of the Africans were chased and were pushed to the what you call the reserves. So this is one of the rural migration, where you can find that maybe an example, this was a highland. So we are giving an example. This is a reserve. Reserve were places where they were unproductive. The land was infertile and they could not produce well to cope up with the African problems. So when the European came in Kenya, they took African lands which were very fertile. These are what we call the highlands. Then Africans were now pushed to rural areas, which we call the reserves. So this is one of the type of rural migration we are talking about. So that's why we are saying European settlement. African from rural areas, those are highland areas, were pushed to what we call the reserves. So that is number one. Point two, we have what we call construction of big dams. So when you talk about the dams, I remember talk about Aswani High Dam, talk about Kariba Dam, Akosombo. Then we have Seven Forks Scheme in Kenya. Those are some of the dams. So you can see that during the establishment of these dams here, people were displaced. In case to build or when we want to build to establish a dam here, then people have to be displaced to move from that area so that the government can establish this dam here. So because of that reason, then we are saying it was also a form of rural migration. So that is what you're talking about. I think that's all. We shall continue from there. Thank you.